Okay. I wonder if I should start launching into it with a bit of an update and then go from there.
Yeah, I think that sounds good.
Cool. So summary for everyone is we are currently in the audit phase. We are waiting on other people, which is always a nerve-wracking experience, but it's going well so far, and we're hopeful that we'll make it for launch. It's just about taking that process there and making sure we do it right, because we don't want to rush this step. So that's sort of the situation where we're at. We've done a lot of other things behind the scenes, and I've been working primarily with the various code reviewers who have taken a look at the code already, as well as the sort of official auditors, and given them some advice on how this kind of step works through. So that's sort of the short-termy stuff. The light paper is coming out as soon as we possibly can. We just, again, we mentioned earlier, and it's still true to this day, that we are a bit of a perfectionist. We like releasing things when they're perfect, and doing things quick versus doing them perfect is sometimes a bit of a mix match. But that is looking good for the next steps. So that's all fab there. In other sort of news, the big sort of recent update we've had is the multi-sig plan. So we're moving from the 4 team members to being 2 team members plus 5 community members. And the reason we're doing that is because we want to mint the treasury, and we want to make sure that everyone is equally invested, and making sure that, you know, we can't do anything nefarious, even with the 2-day time lock that we've already talked about. So that's sort of the plan there. The sort of other things going on is we've got the auction UI design ongoing. The design for that is now sort of finalized. We're just sort of turning that into code. Again, we're sharing more in that in the next week. The other sort of long-term things are the audit plan. We're going to do 2 official ones alongside the code review now, and then we'll do probably one after launch around 1.1, and then another one probably late summer with some of the big auditors who are sort of massively overbooked from all things. But that's kind of just a whole load of information dump. I'd love for this to be a bit more of a chat. I see some people have gone for the camera on, which I'm lovely to see, and some of our sort of well-known community members as well. So thank you very much for doing that. Yeah, so fire away any questions in the chat, or feel free to mic up and have a thing. Okay, fair enough. Terabellis has asked about who's on Encode Club, what's their role there. So they already are multi-sig for a couple of other partnerships. The Saddle is the big one, which is already there. They've also someone who's been supporting us from the very beginning, so we have a lot of respect for them. There's a lot more other sort of well-known people who we're talking to about becoming multi-sig signers, and in addition to other sort of more community stuff and the strategic partnership stuff, which we mentioned earlier. So hopefully that answers your question a little bit. But yeah. So John, have you managed to get your details working at the moment? Because I know you're having a bit of stuff.
Yeah, no, it's not looking good. No, but that's okay. Voice is still here. I'm still speaking. I'm still going.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, the private key, I hope, will not be kept in office drawer. If it is, it will be on a nice ledger with plenty of authentication behind it.
Hopefully one in pink to match my new avatar.
John's been telling us all about his plans for having a sort of pink ledger from the beginning. So loads of questions dropped in. Theo, pleasure. Any ideas about bank thumping beyond the current reward schedule? Yes. One of the things we want to do is we want to move away from like a big sort of bank phase style launch of rewarding people who mint, and then also in a very sort of large way to incentivize that kind of huge launch and then big tail off because we don't think it's the best way, and we don't think it's the most efficient way of actually getting float into people's hands. Instead, we want people who are interested in float for float, as opposed to interested in float for how much reward they can get in the Genesis style event. So what we're planning to do is use the funds which we were planning to use for that to instead heavily incentivize early float LPs post-launch. And we've got some other ideas to incentivize the right type of float users. And so there will be both float and other uses for bank and float going forwards. Obviously, the focus on the next few weeks is getting everything done, getting the product launch ready, and we've got so many ideas that we want to get through. Like, to give you some examples, I'm very keen on doing a sort of flash loaning link in the basket, because I think using that ETH is a really valuable thing. So that's in a sort of 1.1. I'm hoping to get that out to some of the auditors before they sort of finish their review, so we can do that early on. Question from MP. Can you provide some details around how Dutch auctions work, and who will be the initial participants? Will there be a UI and API? So starting from the beginning, the Dutch auctions work by, we do have a UI for it. There is a very clear UI about how you can sell bank, or it depends on which sort of case it is. So either it will be a buying float or you'll be selling float. And if you're buying float, you'll buy it in an ETH bank split. It's all very clear. It sounds slightly confusing there, but the UI is like think about like a Uniswap, but you have two tokens at the top, and then you have a sort of dial in the center for the sort of progress through the auction and how that sort of is working. And in terms of who can be participants, everyone can. It's always been a key thing from the beginning that these auctions are very open. Eventually, we'll get to the point where auctions will be completely open and anyone can start one whenever they fancy. So that's kind of the answer there for UMP. Cood, I don't know if I'm saying that right, but to answer your question, I think that the Ohm guys are running their project in a really interesting way. I think there's the mechanics behind their distribution are fascinating in terms of the sort of highly compounding effect, but they're also, I'm curious to see how they work in the long run. Whereas we've always decided our thing is from the beginning is something which should last and shouldn't just be like a quick one-hit wonder, which is not saying Ohm is. It's just part of the mechanics behind that is that the rate of increase in price has to support that, which is quite a tricky task when you have the compounding effect coming on. So the runway for that is quite interesting. Cool. I feel like I've talked a lot, John, if you want to pick up a couple of questions.
So, okay. Gcon. Well, first of all, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but thanks for your question. So, charting the post-ceremony territory. So I guess, post-minting ceremony, you're going to have the first auction, right? And that will be everyone's first experience of participating. Well, actually, before that, we'll have a period of interesting time where I think people will be trying to figure out what they can sell float for and whether they should keep it or not. Then we'll go into the first auction, where depending on whether the float price is above, the float price is above the target price or below, we'll enter an expansionary or a contractionary case. I mean, depending on demand, it's looking like it could be an expansion. And in that case, the protocol will be minting float to sell to arbitragers, which they can buy with ETH and a blend of bank. That's really the first mechanical thing in line. After that, I assume you're also referring to like strategic partnerships. This is a very good point. So realistically, it's like, using float as collateral, for example, on other platforms can't really happen until float necessarily exists, right?
It's like it will go into the FIT queue, for example, but what I...
Okay. Thought we had a question there, but...
So there's that also to deal with. And, you know, we're slowly building our links now, but realistically, like, yeah, you know, I mean, for you to use Float in other places, Float needs to exist. How you can help is by being the wonderful community member you already are, and keep supporting us on our mission to really create, you know, an internet currency. But thanks for your question. Anything else you wanted to add to that on top, Paul? Or?
Yeah, no, I think you covered the basis there. It's the whole point of these kind of stable currencies. You want to be able to use them for something. And yes, you get a level of protection by being in float as opposed to being in USDC, or in the other extreme case of ETH. So we think it's quite a clever mechanism to just hold. But beyond that, we also think that float's useful in a number of other ways, which is where the sort of partnership stuff which we've been building. We've been having a lot of chats with a lot of various DeFi protocols and DeFi founders and things like that, and about how we can do that and how we can do those kind of integrations. Linked to the sort of the next couple of questions is
yeah, so
Hooky Nookie, which I think is a brilliant name, by the way, has said, when we see what these auctions look like, we're going to be releasing a couple of screen grabs of that shortly, because we think it's going to be fun for everyone to engage and take a look. It's a really cool UI. I think the designer's done a great job there.
I'm quite impressed, yeah.
Yeah, so that's our plan there. Link to MP's question about so anyone who wants to buy float has to first buy bank pair with it in ETH, or is the pool tokens that can be used? So for float, during the sort of minting ceremony kind of thing, which we've been nicknaming it, we're planning to do from stable coins into float. So if you're interested, that's the sort of route there. We've got other sort of couple fun mechanics to work with there to try and make it a little bit more interesting in terms of how we make sure we incentivize people who are in it for the long haul. But the sort of core principle of it is the price will be fixed. At that price will be the golden ratio, and you can buy it using other stablecoins, because it's kind of transferring you from this sort of USD pegged world into the sort of more interesting, less pegged situation. Cool. Wow. Yeah, I think the expansion contraction game is definitely an interesting one. I don't think it'll be for everyone, and I also think that arbitrageurs will get very efficient at doing it. So it's a fun thing at the start where it's at human paces, and then will slowly become less humanized and more automated. And that's good for the protocol, because that means it becomes a lot smoother, but it's also going to become less of a sort of spectacle in the UI perspective. And I agree, adoption is key. Like the Pool Together is a great example of the kind of partnerships and stuff we've been approaching already, because we think that's really vital to get this kind of aspect of utility. Like, what's the point in having a stable coin which you can't use for things? Like a unit of account which has no use is crazy, and that's not the plan. The plan is very much to make sure. Loads more questions. I'm coming quicker than I can answer them. But,
they're flying in now. So I guess, so MP, what is the basket factor bank versus ETH? No, so just to pick up on this, the basket factor is the value of ETH that is held by the protocol divided by the value of float in circulation. So just to quickly deal with that.
You can think of it like a collateralization ratio, but it's not quite the same, because it's based upon what the target price is. So you can think of how much support there is to the current price. Is kind of the one way you can think about it in phrasing it differently. Currently have partnerships with strong use cases. The answer is from Kenny, this is about strong partnerships for use cases. We have a couple of people who we're chatting to in more detailed ways, and we have some very more concrete plans and some looser plans. We'll be releasing those over the next week, so you've got something to look forward to. We don't want to sort of give away all the secrets before we sort of start ramping up for launch, because we're still waiting on the auditors, and we've got this sort of very clear plan of making sure this thing is as safe and secure. We don't want to have like a bug on release, which has been common in other places. So, and sort of linked to that, strategic partners we think are really important because we think long-term supporters, which will help us sort of go to market, have integrations and ensure this protocol adoption. This in some ways is the hardest part. This is the harder than coming up with this, this design is making sure it has this kind of long-term use case. And we're not sort of planning to sort of disappear. We want to hang around and make sure this thing lasts. And we also want to make sure that those use cases stick around, which is why we think those partnerships are what we need to make sure that happens. Yeah. Do you have anything to add on that, John, or do I cover it?
No, I think you covered it. I think you're spot on, you know, because it all comes in steps, right? You know, we're not going to take over the world tomorrow. As much as would I like to per se? I don't know. But you know, the strategic partners are certainly an essential step to you know, people paying for their Pokemon balls and float, right? So, you know,
yeah, for sure. Link to the next question from Jason, which again, I think is a really clever name, but I'm a bit of a nerd in that respect.
It's a very good name.
Can you supply? Yeah, can you supply more details on the airdrop to hackers? Yes, we can. We want to have more developers interested in the playing with float and the ecosystem, and we're exploring organizing an airdrop to developers within that crypto ecosystem. We want it to be like a proof of hacker, if you want to think of it. And there are a couple of sort of approaches we can take for this. The sort of classical one would be doing something related to Gitcoin, but also we have this great relationship already with Encode that we've talked about. So they can act as an oracle for people who've participated in hackathons to make the sort of privacy preserving element, which obviously we believe strongly in, that, you know, you don't have to sort of put your face out there to have something which is valuable. Because we do think that what you build is more important than who you are, which has always been a core concept for us. The Terabellus is asking about audits being released. The answer is they likely will. We want to have a public released audit. We've got a lot of code reviewers which probably won't be released and probably will remain more in-house, depending on what they think and whether they want us to. We will have a proper released public audit you can all have a look at, and I might even sort of talk through any of the findings they do find, because I do think it's valuable for people to understand what's going on there if there are stuff.
Definitely, I completely agree. I mean, in a similar thing that you did with, you know, I mean, lest we mention it here, but like Flex and that fork, you know, I think it's so important that we found what the issue was and also educated the wider public and community, you know, where they can look out for these things. It's all part of sharing, you know?
Yeah. And I think it's sometimes quite hard to do. Like it's doing your due diligence is getting progressively harder as these things become more complicated.
Yeah.
And so I think there is a lot of value in making sure everyone understands how to do it and trying to make that as easy as possible to do. C has asked a question about low volatility of float, making it a hedge against the downside. Is this something you guys think about in the future? So this is using options to hedge against downwards pressure. There is a lots of things that we can do with the basket and the value that the protocol has in sort of quite interesting ways. And we talked a lot about, we mentioned earlier about bonds being another sort of version 1.5 kind of action, because we think that there's a lot of value there in providing multiple avenues for stabilization. Because at the moment we have these auctions, which we think will be really efficient and effective, but there are other options that we can pursue, which will take a sort of different approach, and having this kind of 2, 3, 4-pronged approach to getting this stable value, we think is a smart move.
And then
JSON linked to that.
JSON, yeah.
Go for it, John.
Float becoming a less volatile Ethereum. Yeah, once again, and love the name. But yeah, so this is kind of part of this road to adoption, which is, I mean, think about the characteristic there. So it's a less volatile Ethereum. So wherever Ethereum is used, as a collateral sense, float becomes actually almost, well, it becomes a better version, a better collateral, because it's less volatile. And so I think that's going to be a huge initial use case in other protocols. A lot of, you know, ETH only maximalists may not like to hear that, but I mean, hey, you know, what can I say? And
yeah, I think the important thing there is that Ethereum is a great protocol, and it's really like, we're building on Ethereum, we think it's great, but the Ether as a currency is doing something very different. It's about paying for computation. It's about being this sort of world computer, and it's kind of that shift there is very different from being a unit of account and being sort of like this stable asset. And I think that's the kind of shift in the distinction I would draw. What do you think, John?
No, I completely agree, right? Which is kind of why, you know, we also use ETH in the basket, and we plan to diversify it. You know, we're here to use the basket to represent the crypto economy as a whole, you know, and so having ETH in there in the first version is excellent, and then to diversify out to things like the cost of updating an oracle via link token, for example, you know, that's taking that a bit step further, just to add on to that as well. Freddie F, how do you compare yourself to Reflexer protocol? How do the volt factor / target price compare? I guess first off the bat with, you know, the similarities is yes, okay, we're both, you know, non-pegged per se, but a key difference straight away is on the target price comparison. So we like to follow the market with our target price changes. So if there's more demand for float, our target price will increase. If there's less demand for float, our target price will decrease gradually. Whereas Reflexer kind of goes the other way. It's a different mechanic where the greater the demand, actually the lower their target price goes, which, you know, okay, yeah, it works. It's a PID controller, but, you know, we're looking at something a bit different. And that's one of the main key differences for us. Furthermore, how our vault actually supports our target price as well. So yeah,
I was about to say, linked to that, like Reflexer ultimately is based on the very same principles that DAI is, in the sense it is a over collateralized system that works off loans. So you put a certain amount of collateral in, and in return you get something which you can use to then buy up the market. That's the sort of stabilization mechanic, which is very different from us, but also necessarily means that in order to have let's say 1,000 RAI in circulation, you need 1,500 equivalent backing. And that mechanic is sort of very market inefficient, because you have to have all this locked up value just to support a very simple price. Algorithmic stablecoins as a whole are trying to get rid of that, and Float in particular does it in a unique way with these sort of balancing auctions, which we think is much more effective and gives a lot more security. Because thinking about the mechanics again, you have to have this line of lockup. You have to go like, oh, I'm going to commit to having this bond, or commit to having this thing which will last me a certain time, or I'm going to, in a sort of collateralized case where I'm trying to liquidate something, I have to put in a bid, and then after that bid, I have a certain amount of time before I even know if that bid's accepted. And those two things mean that there's a lot of uncertainty that is built into the system, because you don't know whether or not the price you've offered is going to be taken up. In Float, that's not how it works. The price you ask for is the price you will get, full stop, or you'll get a better price, which is a neat trick in the sense, as long as you get to a point which you're like, this is acceptable, you can then progressively get better and better deals. So I think that's another sort of.
Yeah, sorry, I was just going to say, that's the beauty of the Dutch auctions, right? In the stabilization events, they're so efficient in terms of pricing you into your purchase.
Yeah, we had an interesting chat with Gauntlet a while ago about Dutch auctions, because that's actually what the sort of liquidation 2.0, which MakerDAO's just released, is planning to use. So literally just after we sort of started designing, we were discovering like, oh yeah, other people are realizing that these Dutch auctions are a neat trick, but they're doing it in a slightly different way, in the sense they have a very liquidization as a process is a gradual decrease to zero, whereas we don't want to decrease to zero, we want to decrease to target price. So mechanically there are some differences there, but it was great chatting to them about it and seeing their perspective and seeing how they were also thinking about it in a very similar way to us, which I think is always fun. MPs asked a question, then we're sort of getting close to our time, so any sort of last minute desperate questions, let us know. But for now, the sort of roadmap post-launch is all about the kind of integrations we've mentioned already. It's all about making sure float can be used and float is used effectively. So we think that the most important thing is to have a stable coin that has use, and then the bank price naturally comes from that, and the bank value comes from that, because unlike most protocols, the governance token is useful and will accrue value from that. So we're always very keen on making sure float is a useful thing that people want to hold, people want to use, and that's the sort of key question about why we're doing that. Cool. Last little burst of questions. I don't know if John wants to pick out his favorite, and then
I guess, yeah, I'll deal with Freddie's.
We'll go from there.
So Freddie F, there's thank you, documentation doesn't seem to go into much detail. So into the target price aspect. Yeah, sorry, we kind of been teasing you on that. So that the maths on the target price will be in the light paper, which is going to be released in the next week. So, or next week. Yeah, I said that. Yeah. So, but yeah, on the precise way that is managed and changed in various market prices or basket factors.
The key thing is it's based upon how the basket factor moves compared to the target factor. So it's basically saying how this ratio changes, which allows us to sort of predict the demand and predict these kind of movements. It's kind of the very simplistic way. Yeah,
exactly. We want to capture market sentiment is the key. Oh, wow. Okay, they're flying in now.
But I think we should cut it short, because I think as much as people have those questions, what we'll do is we'll link the Discord. You can ask more questions there, because that's, I think, is always great, or in Telegram as well. We're always active and mentioning stuff there. In general, it's great to hear from you guys. Great to see you all having a chat, and we're looking forward to sort of keeping in contact as these things go on. Anything else, John, or should I give my voice a break?
John's happy, honestly. You've been very chatty this evening. I love hearing your voice personally, Paul. So
well, hopefully everyone else does. Otherwise, they'll be going, "Oh God, please let John speak more."
Awesome. Well, yeah, cheers everyone. Cool. Thanks so much, and we'll keep you posted. Take care. Thanks again for the help from everyone at Encode as well. So cheers for hosting this.
Thanks all. That was great. Cheers.
Bye-bye.